I count at least 10 seats that are competitive for Republicans that are currently held by Democrats. I'd like to walk through them with you, Senator, since you chair the National Republican Senatorial Committee. First of all, West Virginia. I think that's a gimme for Governor Justice, isn't it?
It is. That race is over. We've won West Virginia. That's 50-50.
All right, let's go then to Montana.
Well, let me say about West Virginia. Jim Justice made something hard look easy. And the way that all worked out, we recruited the best candidate that was leading Joe Manchin by 20 points in a hypothetical poll, got him in the race, got President Trump to endorse Governor Justice. That sealed the deal, and that forced Manchin to retirement. We won West Virginia without firing a shot, spending any money.
I love that. Let's go to Tim Sheehy. He was on the show yesterday. How's it look in Montana?
Tim is great. I mean, he's just one of the best bios, one of the great American warrior hero stories, a Navy SEAL, Naval Academy grad, wife's a Naval Academy grad. She's a Marine, both deployed to Afghanistan, successful businessman. That race in Montana right now is tied. We see that as a dead heat. If Tim can keep that close up until Labor Day, I like our odds as voters will break, I think, our way between Labor Day and November. Keep in mind, they've dropped $45 million of attack ads on Tim Sheehy since last November, Hugh. When I get back to Montana virtually every weekend. Last November, Thanksgiving, I'm at my house there in the Gallatin Valley. I'm trying to watch a football game. I can't get through all the negative Sheehy ads that Schumer and Tester are dropping on Tim Sheehy. Keep in mind, that's the equivalent of $500 million being dropped on a guy like Dave McCormick in Pennsylvania. We just have 1 million people, Hugh. We've got 3 cows per person in Montana. 1 million people. That's a $500 million airdrop on top of Dave McCormick, if that were equivalent. And the fact that Sheehy has survived that says a lot about Tim Sheehy, but it probably says a lot about the vulnerabilities of John Tester in Montana.
Before we go to Pennsylvania and Dave, I want to do my home state, which is Ohio, Senator Daines. Bernie Moreno's a friend of mine. I like Bernie a lot. I think he has sparkle. How's the race look? Because Sherrod Brown has been on the public payroll for 50 years. It's time to make him get a job.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt about it. Bernie's a great candidate, and Bernie, won that primary. He won every one of Ohio's 88 counties in that primary. So Bernie's started there, ran a great primary race, had a great primary victory. The issue we have with candidates like John Tester and Sherrod Brown, these are formidable, well-funded, massively funded candidates, both in terms of the hard dollars they raise and the super PAC dollars. You're going to see that race continue to close. I think we've got Bernie down a few points in Ohio at the moment. But again, here's something to keep in mind in Ohio, Hugh, which you know, and that is look at J.D. Vance in 2022. He got outspent 3-1. He ran against Tim Ryan, a very strong candidate who sounded more Republican than J.D. Vance did in terms of messaging. He had to because of, Ohio has become a red state. But J.D. Vance won with 53.3% of the vote. That's the precise margin that Trump had in 2020 at 53.3%. Here's the point. There's less ticket splitting going on in states like Montana, like Ohio. There's less distance between the Senate race and the presidency. That bodes well for Bernie Moreno as we think as we get closer to November, that's all going to tighten up and voters are going to be less inclined to split their tickets as we start heading closer to November.
All right, over to Pennsylvania, to Steeler country. Dave McCormick, veteran of West Point, the 82nd Airborne, very successful businessman. He is a Steelers fan. I forgive him for that. He's on the program almost every other week. What do you think, Senator Daines?
Well, look, I'm an old Procter & Gamble guy, Hugh. If Procter & Gamble were running a Senate race in Pennsylvania, it looked like Dave McCormick's race. I mean, it's really a great race. We've got a great candidate. Dave McCormick is not making any unforced errors on the battlefield as we're litigating this race. He's well funded. He's well messaged. Pennsylvania's a little tougher state. It's got a little bluer tint to it. Key number to watch in Pennsylvania is going to be how Trump does there. Right now, we're seeing Trump up a couple points in Pennsylvania. You remember those blue-collar voters have rejected the green collar of the left, the green hallucination, and they're wearing the red collar now. That we've seen it in Ohio, we've seen it in Montana, in Pennsylvania. What's going to be key in Pennsylvania is Trump's margin. What's very interesting, if you look at the last 2 presidential races with Trump on the ballot in 16 and 20, Hugh, There have been 69 Senate races while Trump's been on the ballot the last 2 times. 34 back in 2016, 35 in 2020. In 68 of 69 of those Senate races, whoever won the presidency, the party that won the presidency, also won the Senate race. The only exception to that was Susan Collins in Maine, where Biden won Maine, but Susan Collins won, of course, her reelect. So again, I think you're going to see as we get closer to November, these Senate races following pretty closely with wherever the president lands. And certainly President Trump's numbers now have never been stronger. We'll see how we shape up here in November, but certainly it's a good week to be a Republican.
I'm in Maine as we speak, Senator Daines. Senator Collins is basically St. Collins up here. And so none of these Democrats have the hold on their state that Susan Collins does on Maine. Let me go to the next tier, which is Arizona, Nevada, and Michigan. Kerry Lake, Sam Brown in Nevada, and Mike Rogers in Michigan. How do those three look to you? Are they doable?
Yeah, they are. We'll take a look at Arizona just objectively. Hugh, in Arizona, Kerry Lake, we have her down a couple points right now. I mean, these are really good polls. I'm a chemical engineer, Hugh. I look at numbers. I don't get tied up in emotions in campaigns. It's very quantitative. Look at the numbers. Look at the messaging. Look at voter turnout. So in Arizona, that's a tight race. Here's what Kerry Lake has going for her. First, she's a very talented candidate. She's very talented in front of the camera. But Ruben Gallego, her opponent, is the most liberal candidate of all 10 of these battleground states. Ruben is way out of step where most Arizonans are at. So Arizona's going to be a tight race. It'll be tight for the presidency. We like where Trump's at right now. He's up a few points. Trump wins Arizona. Kerry Lake's odds look pretty good there in Arizona. Let's go to Nevada for a moment with Sam Brown. Sam is a West Point grad, severely wounded on the battlefield. His wife, Amy, is also a veteran, a great American hero story. What's interesting about Nevada, you look at the tightest race in 22 is Adam Laxalt's loss in Nevada, 8,000 votes. That's 4 votes per precinct. Very, very tight. Here's what's different in 24. If you look at voter turnout in suburban areas, particularly in Clark County where Las Vegas is, their voter turnout in a non-presidential is about 73% actually in the suburban areas. That's true also in a presidential. The difference is in rural parts of Nevada, the voter turnout in a non-presidential is about 53%. In a presidential, it's about 75%. Those rural voters are our voters. These Trump voters tend to be lower propensity voters. They're going to show up in the presidential when they didn't show up in the midterm. Had Adam Laxalt be running with Trump on the ballot this time, Laxalt would have won in 22. That's why I like Sam Brown's chances there this year in 24.
Mike Rogers, Michigan Senator.
So I think this is one of the under-talked about races is Michigan. Why? It's an open seat. Senator Stabenow retires. Anytime there's an open seat, obviously opportunities for pickup. That race is a dead heat. It's tied. It's a 40-40 race right now. Mike Rogers, former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, former FBI agent, very accomplished guy. Similar to Dave McCormick, will make very few unforced errors between now and Election Day. Mike's issue is resources. It truly is. He has a primary. That primary is August 6th. He's up by 25 points. President Trump has endorsed Mike Rogers. That's a resource race. It's a 40-40 race right now. Whoever gets the most money in Michigan, on top of having Trump winning it by a couple of points, that's going to be key to Mike Rogers' victory.
Now, Senator, you're too young to remember the election of 1980, but I was sitting in my law school room with a bunch of Democrats, and Birch Bayh lost, and Fred Harris lost, and all these Democrats kept tumbling over as Ronald Reagan brought in a Senate majority, and Howard Baker became the Senate majority leader. To do that, we need Eric Hobdy, who's on later. We need Nella Domenici, and we need Hung Cao. Can we reach that? Those three are reaches.
Yeah. So Eric Hobdy's a great candidate in Wisconsin, business guy. Here's what's key to all these races, Hugh. We started out in terms of laying out a strategy when I took over as chairman for this election cycle. We've got to find candidates that can win not only primaries, but general elections. There's 3 buckets of votes we've got to be able to win. One's the MAGA lane within the Republican Party. Second is we got to bring the non-MAGA lane home. And third is independent voters. And then avoid primaries. By the way, There's been $250 million less spent in Republican primaries this cycle than the 22 cycle. The Democrats have spent $60 million more in their primaries this cycle than last. That's about $300 million that has not been spent in terms of either Republican red-on-red violence or Democrats actually having to spend money on beating each other up. And that all moves forward then, theoretically to the general election. Eric Hovey's another example of that. He cleared the primary. He's been able to run a general election type themed candidacy since he got in the race. He's a business guy. He's put some money in that race. He's very Wisconsin. He's got the right kind of Wisconsin accent, Hugh. And that race is actually, if we watch polling, has probably moved the most of any race. He started out the most behind. He's down right now probably 3 or 4 points. Eric's, he's going to have to get Trump there, probably winning Wisconsin. Eric Hovey's got a real good shot there. We like our odds. Let me talk about New Mexico and Nella Domenici. That's a bit of a sleeper race right now. We've got Trump down just 1 point in that blue state of New Mexico. Nella Domenici's father, Pete Domenici, was a beloved U.S. Senator, the longest-serving U.S. Senator in New Mexico history. Nella is a very accomplished businesswoman, Georgetown grad, Harvard grad. She was Dave McCormick's CFO at Bridgewater when Dave was CEO. Very astute business executive, running a great race. We've got her down, single digits, 3 or 4 points right now in New Mexico. If it's one of these nights when the voters broke towards Reagan, like I said, back in 1980, against a very weak president, Jimmy Carter, there's a lot of parallels in the 79-80 era from what we're seeing right now. New Mexico is one of these states that could be put in play.